Hi everyone, it's James here from Pro Tools Expert, back with Gear Review Heaven this time. This is the EMI RS124 compressor in association with Abbey Road Studios, built by those lovely people at Chandler Limited. This thing is pure class in a glass. This is like no other compressor you've ever used. Unless, of course, you were recording at Abbey Road back in the 60s, then you've probably used this thing quite considerably. It is stunning. It's like nothing else I've ever tried, nothing else I will probably ever use again. So let's get up close and personal with the RS124. So here we are, up close and personal on the RS124. It's a beautiful thing, built for utility, not for comfort or speed or anything like that. This thing is very practical. So, starting on the right-hand side, we have this fuse control. Now, this isn't actually the fuse under here, like you'd often see. It's actually a switch, and it takes us between kind of full out burning the valve mode and a kind of half power mode. Very handy if you don't want to use that full on compression sound. Power control, power indicator, and our output attenuator. And as always with this stuff, it's beautiful, it's chunky, it's pretty damn awesome. In the center of the unit, we have the compression meter or the gain reduction meter. Generally, this is what I would call a fairly hardcore compressor. Tickling the meter, you don't really get much out of it. You want to slam this thing, as we'll be doing shortly. Next over, we have our three main controls. Our input control, or input gain effectively, and our attack and our recovery or release. Now, the attack section we'll look at first, and you can see here 1 to 9 on the attack settings. But there are also these three indicated settings, 670B, 650A, and 61010B. Now, these settings are actually modelled on the three units that the whole RS124 was based on. They have three units at Abbey Road that originated as Altex that were then bought out by Abbey Road and were then kind of mutated into what we now have here, the RS124. So the 670B, the 650A, and the 61010B are all units that actually do exist at Abbey Road. They were shipped out to Chandler in the States and they modelled them point for point. So that is a model of one of the units they have at Abbey Road. That's another one, and that's another one. They're all very, very, very slightly different. I mean, it's very subtle, but devil's in the detail. They've done a great job. I love the fact that I've got units available to me that are actually built for and maintained by the guys at Abbey Road. So the recovery setting is actually very, very cool, all the way from fast to slow. But what we also have is these red dots marked as hold. Now, the Abbey Road engineers used this to keep from hearing the compression clamp down at the beginning of a track. They'd play the hottest part of the track, let the compressor trigger, and then switch to the nearest hold setting to save that compression. So you wouldn't get that kind of sound. You wouldn't get that kind of pre-compression sound when you're starting the track. Of course, it could work the other way around, whereas you compress at the quietest part of the track, so you're only just compressing, hit hold, and then the compressor won't compress anymore, depending on the input gain that you were getting through to the compressor. Now, that makes sense in my head. Hopefully it does in yours. Now, the last kind of control on the RS124 is this balance control and this random looking kind of dial or gauge up here. Now, I'm going to turn up my monitors and I'm going to put Pro Tools in the record so you can actually hear this. Now, this is actually the balance control. Now, because this is a valve compressor, it's variable mu. So what you may happen to get sometimes is the compressor being unbalanced. So what we do is take a screwdriver, press the balance control, and what this does is actually flickers a little lamp inside here, and you should hear a flickering sort of sound. And then what we do, stick a screwdriver in there, and we trim it back until it's as quiet as possible. That's pretty quiet, so quite happy with that. So back in the old days, the Abbey Road engineers would actually have to get inside the chassis to do this, but the guys at Chandler have put this feature on the front, so you can reset, rebalance your compressor really, really quickly with minimal loss of time to the session. Very, very cool. So around the back, it is a very, very simple beast indeed. We have the output XLR, the input XLR, our impedance control between 200 and 600. Again, think of this as a kind of boost, full-on kind of setting. And we have a link, so these two will link together to form a stereo pair, so they will work very well, very neatly in phase as a stereo pair. Very, very simple unit to control. And of course, over here, we have the power supply input and the main fuse. So we've talked about it, we've looked at it, we've even seen it up close. Now let's hear the thing. First of all, we're going to try some bass through it. Again, I've been told this thing needs to be slammed, it needs to be hit pretty hard. So first of all, you'll hear the bass with no compression at all, just so you have a kind of a reference. And then I'll start winding in some controls and we'll tweak some stuff. We'll try the 3 Abbey Road settings. I'll show you the hold control, we'll talk through that. But we're going to hit it pretty hard. We're going to compress this thing pretty damn hard. So here's the bass on its own with no compression whatsoever. So that's clean. Now let's put the compressor back in. Slightly annoyingly, there's no actual bypass switch. I suspect that's because there wasn't one on the original. So I'm going to reconnect the cables back into the unit, and then we'll start playing with some compression. So you can see, even with the input control set practically to 0 and the output control set practically to 0, so theoretically it's kind of 1-to-1, I'm still getting sort of 5 or 6 dBs of compression at a fast setting on the 650A setting. Let's actually record that, see what we get. Okay, let's juice things up a bit. So I've just notched the output back a little bit, and I'm going to find myself a nice compression ratio. Hold that. Now, it's only going to hold until I go over that point, and then of course it's going to compress a little bit more and hold at that point. So I quite like the fast setting because I quite like it to recover and let's try the difference between these, hit it fairly hard. Let's try and hear the difference between these 3 different Abbey Road settings. So 670B, .650A, and the 610-10B. very sort of retro, vintage kind of sound. I wouldn't say this was a modern sort of funky tone or anything like that, but it's got something that's very reminiscent of the 60s, very Beatles. Let's face it, it's Valve, it's from Abbey Road. So it's going to be sort of creaming that stuff all over the place. So let's try and slam this thing really hard. And you can hear that release come straight back out again. It sounds awesome. You can definitely hear why they put those hold notches on there. Not quite so heavy. I think this deserves... nice fast attack and a fast release. Yeah, I'm loving that. Really, really like it. So there you go. That's a very, very quick look at what this baby can do. This is, of course, the EMI RS124 compressor with Abbey Road, built by Chandler. A thing of beauty. I think this is going to be quite rare. I don't think it's going to be an everyday go-to compressor, but certainly if you want to slam the living out of something, give it that real kind of vintage, retro, kind of 60s kind of vibe, this is the way forward. Has to be said, they're not cheap, but nothing of quality ever is. So I hope you enjoyed that. I've been James from Product Expert, and I'll see you again soon for some more gear talk.